Hi, my name is Abhishek Rai and I work for BMC Cloud Lifecycle Management product. Today I'm going to talk about changes required when replacing an existing cluster with a new cluster. The plan is to discuss changes required when you replace an existing cluster with a new cluster. Once you're done with the configuration, you will have an understanding of all the artifacts required when you replace an existing cluster with a new cluster. During the demo, we will discuss on classes which needs to be touched to make the necessary changes. Let's switch to the BMC underscore cluster class and talk about these configuration changes. Okay, I'm on a BMC underscore cluster class and I have already populated my old cluster information or the old cluster configuration item. So as we have introduced a new cluster, we'll have to make sure that the existing cluster configuration items should reflect the information of new cluster. So for that, there are a couple of sections where we need to change the domain IDs. So the sections are name section, short description. Then under the general tab, you have token ID where you need to modify the domain ID of your new cluster. Then custom 3 tab where you have got external ID, and when you expand that, you can see a domain ID of your old cluster. So these all information needs to be replaced with the new information or new ID of your cluster. To get the cluster domain ID, there are two ways. One is you can run the REST call, or you can switch to your BMC server automation console and find the domain ID. So let's switch to BSA console. Okay, I've already populated the property, but let me show you how I did that. For that, you need to live browse your vCenter server, then expand the VMware vCenter server virtualization property, then expand the cluster section, and then right click your cluster name and then click on properties, and that will show you this window. Internal attribute one is the attribute, and the value for that needs to be copied because that's the domain ID of your new cluster. Copy that cluster ID, click close, switch back to your BMC underscore cluster form and replace the old value with a new value which you have just copied. But before you replace that, make sure you copy the old domain ID as well, because we need to query into BMC underscore storage volume form for the old data store records which were referring to the old cluster. And we need to replace the old cluster domain ID from that form, and we need to make sure that those CIs are referring to the new cluster. Once you're done with the configuration on this form, click OK and then switch back to your BMC underscore storage volume form, then search. So let's make a new search and switch to custom 3 tab, then paste domain ID of your old cluster, then click on search button. You may have a single record or have multiple records based on the data you have in your infra. Select all the records and then click on modify all. Then expand the external ID section and modify or replace the old domain ID with the new one, and then click OK. Once that is done, then you have a new cluster information available into CloudDB. I hope this video was informative for you, and I would like to thank you for watching this.